Take a second and just look around the room you're sitting in right now. The buildings, the roads outside your window, the hum of electricity, it all feels so incredibly permanent, doesn't it? Like it's always going to be there. But today, in this explainer, we're going to dive into a universal fascination we all seem to share, and that is ghost towns. These are places totally frozen in time, and they serve as a chilling reminder of the forces that can wipe a thriving settlement completely off the map.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What actually happens when a thriving city just stops? How does a place filled with thousands of hopes, daily routines, and bustling streets become absolutely silent? We kind of always assume that human civilization only moves forward, expanding and growing. But history shows us just how incredibly fragile our habitats really are.
10 cities, 0 inhabitants. It's pretty haunting, honestly. These are once vibrant places scattered all across the globe. Places filled with life, industry, families, and now they're completely devoid of human presence. So we're going to decode the exact reasons why these 10 specific locations were abandoned to the ghosts of the past.
To make sense of all this, we'll break it down by the exact causes of their demise. We're going to look at the wrath of nature, the scars of war, the roller coaster of industrial boom and bust, what happens during the ultimate catastrophe, and finally, how nature always reclaims its territory.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, the wrath of nature.
Sometimes nature moves fast, like incredibly fast. Before 1943, San Juan Parangacuttiro in Mexico was this thriving, historic town. And then, literally right in its backyard, a volcano was born. The Paraquitan volcano, which is actually the youngest volcano in the Americas, just erupted and buried almost the entire city in lava. Today, the only sign that life ever existed there are the ruins of the old church, just poking out of the solid volcanic rock. The surviving residents had to undertake a massive rural exodus to an old farm just to rebuild their lives in what they now call Nuevo San Juan Parangacuttiro.
But, nature doesn't always use massive explosions, right? Sometimes it uses slow, agonizing defeat. Take Arapira. It's an old Portuguese village in the Brazilian state of Paraná. Back in the 1930s, this place had about 500 families living in it. But the residents gradually left for nearby cities, and today this historic heritage site, which still has an old church, a cemetery, even a jail, is slowly being swallowed by the sea. Nature is just patiently eroding the ground right out from underneath it.
Okay, moving on to part 2, the scars of war.
Because if there's one thing that can create a ghost town literally overnight, it's human conflict. We've got 3 vastly different cities here, all emptied by conflict. First, Kayakoyu in Turkey. This was an 18th century town that actually survived earthquakes and fires, only to be completely abandoned because of post-World War II Greco-Turkish conflicts. Today, it just sits there with 500 ruined houses like an open-air museum. Then you have Akramara in Georgia, which was a Soviet coal town of 5,000 workers that was booming in the 70s, but completely emptied in the 1990s due to war and the fall of the Soviet Union. And finally, Varosha in Cyprus, a bustling tourist district totally frozen in time by invasion.
40,000. I really want you to let that number sink in for a second. In 1974, when the Turkish army invaded, 40,000 inhabitants and tourists were forced to immediately abandon Varosha. What was once his highly visited beach resort, packed with newly built 1970s hotels, was completely fenced off. The buildings have just been degrading with time as military forces refused to hand it back, leaving an entire coastal resort totally abandoned.
Now I want to pivot to something deeply tragic. 640. That is the devastating human cost of the massacre at Oradour-sur-Glane in France.
On June 10, 1944, German soldiers surrounded the small French town of about 1,000 residents. They separated the population, forcing the men into barns and the women and children into the village church. In an absolutely horrific event, about 190 men were shot, and the church, holding roughly 450 women and children, was set on fire. The soldiers then burned the rest of the town and fled. Today, Oradour-sur-Glane has deliberately never been rebuilt. Its ruined buildings, burned cars, everyday personal belongings, they remain exactly as they were left. It serves as a grim but absolutely vital memorial to the atrocities of World War II and a powerful symbol of French resistance.
Which brings us to part 3, industrial boom and bust.
Okay, so get this. Abandoned because of flesh-eating fire ants? Sounds like a movie, right?
Well, this is the bizarre urban legend surrounding Vejo, a town hidden deep in the Amazon rainforest. Founded by Portuguese colonizers way back in 1694, local legend says that residents fled because the town was invaded by fire ants with a highly painful bite, which earned it the terrifying nickname, the Antapocalypse City.
But reality check. The ants didn't eat the city. Economics did. The historical reality is that Vejo became incredibly wealthy and important between 1880 and 1900 because they were extracting latex for rubber production. People built massive, beautiful houses there. But the second the rubber cycle ended, the wealth simply dried up. It was financial ruin, not insects, that forced the residents to pack up and relocate to the nearby city of Novo Arion, leaving their grand homes to crumble into jungle ruins.
We see this same dramatic economic rise and fall over on Hashima Island in Japan. Check out this timeline. In 1890, Mitsubishi bought this island 15 kilometers off the coast of Nagasaki to mine submarine coal. By 1916, they had to build Japan's very first massive concrete building just to house the surging population of workers. They eventually had over 5,200 people tightly packed onto this tiny island. But then the 1960s hit. Global energy shifted, petroleum replaced coal, and by 1974, Mitsubishi closed the mines and evacuated everyone. They left behind this incredibly eerie, concrete ghost island just sitting out in the sea.
But sometimes, industry doesn't just run out of cash, it literally poisons its own workforce. Wittenoom in Western Australia was built right on top of a massive blue asbestos deposit. This created fatal, microscopic mineral fibers in the air that were incredibly easy to inhale. And tragically, that contaminated air led to the deaths of over 2,000 people who lived and worked there. It got so bad, the local government had to step in and force the town to shut down in the late 1970s. Today, the entire area is highly toxic, completely closed off, and surrounded by warning signs about the lethal risks of even stepping foot near it.
That takes us to part 4, the ultimate catastrophe.
And the contrast here is just staggering. Before 1986, Pripyat in Ukraine was like the model city. It boasted incredibly well-planned infrastructure and was home to 50,000 people. Today, it's a highly radioactive ghost town, securely trapped inside a 30-kilometer exclusion zone. Buildings are decaying, and everyday objects from the evacuation are just sitting there right where they were dropped, gathering radioactive dust.
The cause, as you might have guessed, was the catastrophic 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster, the largest in history. When the nearby plant exploded and leaked immense amounts of radioactive material, thousands were exposed to fatal levels of radiation. This forced an immediate, permanent evacuation of the entire city. Pripyat went from a bustling hub of 50,000 lives to a deadly, isolated wasteland practically overnight.
And finally, part 5, nature always reclaims.
If there is one overarching lesson to take away from this whole explainer, it's the inevitable return of the natural world. Think about the cities we've analyzed today. In Akamara, massive Soviet apartment blocks are currently being swallowed whole by the dense Georgian forest. In San Juan Parangaricutiro, a historic town sits firmly entombed under solid volcanic rock. And in Araraparita, the ocean is just patiently eroding the ground away. It really shows us that whether a city falls to war, industrial greed, or lethal radiation, human absence is really just an open invitation for nature to step back in and reclaim the space it once owned.
So I want to leave you with this thought to chew on next time you're walking down your street. Given how quickly a thriving settlement of 50,000 people can become a toxic wasteland, or how fast a bustling tourist resort can be frozen behind military wire, are the cities we build today truly permanent, or are we just borrowing this space for a little while until nature decides it wants it back? Let that sink in.